thank you for tuning in. As always, I'm here in service to all of you, and given the beautiful day that we're at today, right now, I really wanted to honor Metresa Anaisa Pie, as well as Metres Mambo Anaisa Pie Dantor, Metres Anaisa Pie de las Siete Vueltas, and just all of the vueltas, that Anaisa Pie has. And today's topic is truly self-love, sin, and our relationships with ourselves as well as with other people. First and foremost, I'd like to open up, with letting you all know that I never give advice that I've never experienced myself, didn't grow out of, and if I'm still struggling with this topic, I wouldn't be talking about it as if advising you all to kind of like take this advice if I myself haven't really progressed. So, over the course of a few years, battling issues with self-love, I'm finally at a place where I can talk about it, give advice, and give guidance by what Anaisa Pie has taught me. And so that's why I dedicate this beautiful day to her, and as well as, this live, this message to all of you in honor of her and with respect to her. First and foremost, self-love is an issue that a lot of people are trying to focus on, and it's not necessarily an issue that you cannot, get out of, or self-love isn't an issue at all that you cannot obtain. Self-love is something truly that is developmental, and self-love definitely does not happen overnight. I know that there's a huge focus on self-love right now, given that a lot of people want to avoid circumstances that get them stuck in toxic relationships, toxic friendships. They want to grow the confidence to, outgrow their family members, or they want to grow the confidence to, stand up to when people are toxic or mean or evil. And a lot of that does have to do with self-love. But I want to just remind everyone of what self-love also looks like. Self-love is about putting yourself first, in the sense of when you have friends that are mentally ill, or just ignorant and refuse to grow out of the way that they think, self-love also looks like avoiding those types of individuals so that you do not get consumed with their ways of thinking or even their own energy. That is self-love as well. Self-love also looks like avoiding people that truly don't even want to help you and only come around when they need you or they need favors from you, or they want to use your talents or you as an energy or you as a personality, or they sometimes even just want to use you to make themselves look good. Self-love is about putting self first, whether it is your interest, your mental health, your emotional health, or even your physical health. That is self-love. Self-love is an acceptance of self. It is a determination and goal of growth. That's what self-love looks like. So given all of the aspects of self-love that I just described to you all, it doesn't take an overnight thing. It isn't an overnight thing. It is something that takes years to truly grow into. Self-love is something that you learn, and you have to go through the valley of death. You have to go through low vibrations. You have to go through hell in order to learn what self-love even is like. And if I feel a little exhausted and tired or not as excited as I normally am, it's because truthfully this past weekend, I was at a ceremony. We honored the Loa, and truthfully it took a huge toll on my body, so I'm still recovering from that. But in honor of Anaisa Pie, I wanted to give this message because I think that the topics of self-love, sin, and the relationships with ourselves and with other people is a necessary topic to truly talk about. Given especially the political worldview that we're facing right now, a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement that we are facing right now, a lot of things that truly are ending friendships, ending relationships, and it's taking also a toll on mental health on a global scale. So I wanted to talk about all of these things in honor of her, given what I've been through, given what I've grown out of, and that's how I'm able to help and advise everyone, because truthfully I never give advice if I'm unable to take it myself, or if I haven't grown out of these circumstances myself. You know what I mean? Because I think it's pretty hypocritical when people give advice on healing but they don't take it themselves, or they've never outgrown those circumstances in the first place. So I think I'm pretty blessed to say that it's safe that I can give this advice to everyone. So number one, when it comes to self-love, what I just described to everyone is pretty much what I myself have learned self-love is like. Self-love, also started with Anaisa in my life. With her, teaching, as she mostly does in most ceremonies, teaching everyone to put yourself first, whether it is, to speak with her or give her, your problems, or, turn to a friend, or even if she brings you, a kind friend into your life. Self-love is always, about healing first and investing in your healing. And for those of you that are struggling right now, if you're in a relationship that you can't seem to get out of, or you're living with a family member or with family that you can't seem to connect well with, or you can't seem to, stop the arguments, and you want to heal your family, or you want to heal that dynamic, or that paradigm with your family, or you want to heal the relationship within yourself, whether you suffer from depression, you suffer from not being able to let go of the past, you suffer from trust issues, or you suffer from a variety of mental or physical ailments, I would like to firstly say that it is not easy and your feelings are valid. And that is something that needs to be reminded, because that is something that Anaisa also teaches, that your feelings are valid, but everything in life is temporary, including your pain, including your depression, including the dynamics, including, the suffering that you may be going through right now. It's all temporary. And I feel like when you're consumed by this energy on a daily basis, you don't remember that, you don't think about it, and you honestly can enter into a stage of hopelessness, especially when you're living with toxic family members, or you find yourself in a toxic relationship. Sometimes you just feel like you're never gonna get out of it. And that hopeless feeling is totally normal. Psychologically, when you are exhausted from toxicity, or you're exhausted from being around negative people or negative energies, it's absolutely normal to feel hopeless, or like you're never going to progress, or you're never going to move forward, or you're never going to get out of it. And I just want to remind all of you that just as Anaisa as a loa in voodoo has taught me, she has taught everyone and always shown us that suffering is so fucking temporary. But your challenge right now, and I challenge everyone, this is the perfect day. Every day. You may not be responsible for what other people do, but you are responsible for how you respond to pain. If you want to learn what self-love looks like, you have to react differently to the pain. You cannot repetitively react or respond to suffering the same way every single day, or you're never going to get past it. One way that you can respond to pain is detach yourself physically, meaning go out for walks when people want to start with you negatively, or people want to, clamor you, or, isolate you, or put you in spaces where you're unable to express yourself out of fear of an argument, or you feel like you're hopeless and you cannot speak. Literally remove yourself physically. If you fear that you may be in a situation where you get kicked out, or you will risk your living space, that's not a situation that you want to be in the first place. And that is for reconsideration if you even want to remain there. And you have to be strong enough to decide whether that is something you even want for yourself. And if that is not something you want for yourself, you literally have to be okay with being removed from that. Because your spirit and you as a human being, you were not made to be controlled or be confined or isolated. And that goes for toxic relationships where your partner doesn't want to see you with friendships, or your partner doesn't want to see you hanging out, or you're not even allowed to party or go out. And truthfully, I feel like when you're young, you kind of want to control your partner, because a lot of people grow up with this idea of it's safer that my partner doesn't have friends, or it's safer that I control my partner because I'm at risk of losing this good thing. And sometimes the good intention that you may be having may actually be harmful to you and to your partner, because the more that your partner or yourself is okay, or shows that you're okay with this continued behavior, the more it's normalized for controlling and manipulative behavior to continue, thus creating more isolation, more toxicity, and even more manipulative behaviors and just psychological suffering and toxicity in the relationship. And Anaisa always teaches us and reminds us to just free yourself from that. So if you want to start with self-love, free yourself physically from all of those circumstances. Something else that you can do in honor of self-love, or to learn about self-love, is return back to who you were before you were afraid. What I mean by that, before you are afraid, I quite literally mean a lot of us develop this fear of perhaps going out to dance, or perhaps being sexual, or perhaps even having friends, when we remove ourselves from a negative situation or person. That fear takes away from you developing meaningful relationships. That fear can lower your self-esteem so much that it takes away from opportunities to grow, right? And so if you want to really start with self-love, try to remember who you were before you were afraid. Because shyness and low self-esteem will completely burn so many opportunities from you. It will completely remove and deteriorate anything that can help build your confidence, or even help build opportunities for love in your life. So if you really want to practice self-love, the way that Anaisa teaches us, number one, think about and remember and honor who you were before you were afraid. Before someone taught you that rejection is always gonna happen, or that you shouldn't dance, or that having sex is a sin, or that if you practice this you'll go to hell, or just things that literally teach you fear. Think about who you were before you were afraid. Tune into that individual that is fearless, because truthfully, fear is nothing but a manipulator. Fear is nothing but something that stops us. It's literally a lie. Fear is non-existent. It literally just consumes our time. It wastes our time. It stops you from living, really. And Anaisa, one of the things that she teaches us is about freedom. And that freedom is so important, because even when it comes to expressing your love to God, you must be able to feel free to express your love to God without feeling like you're limited to being on your knees or going to a church. Because at the end of the day, your relationship with God, just as your relationship with your friends, should be one of freedom and total love. You know what I mean? And that's why Anaisa is so important in our lives, because she is the sweetness that we need, and she is the freedom that reminds us that love starts with freedom. Right, baby? Love starts with freedom. And we cannot allow for fear to consume that freedom, because love and fear cannot be in the same space without it completely at some point making us cautious, worry, or completely ruining that freedom to love. And I'll get into the dynamic of fear and love and why it cannot be in the same space. And number one, for example, when we think about God's unconditional love, God is also not afraid that we're gonna mess up, because unconditional love is about accepting you for who you are. And when we think about how God loves us, we must love ourselves the same way, in the sense of know your mistakes, and knowing your mistakes and knowing who you are as a person first is so important, because when you accept that you can be wrong, you can also start working on those errors in order to grow, whether it's for yourself or for the dynamic of you and a partner, or for the dynamic of you and a family member. Because let's be honest, we can all be toxic. Each and every one of us have the ability to be toxic. And the worst part you can do is to ever think that you can never be wrong. You can always be wrong. And it's okay, because when you notice and you know that you can be wrong and you are wrong, take the time to also be okay with the fact that you're wrong, and be also okay with learning how to correct that wrong. You know what I mean? That is also self-love, because self-love is not about loving yourself and accepting yourself and thinking that you're completely without error, or you're completely without, mistakes, or as if you're not capable of hurting someone. Because even sometimes, yes, we can hurt someone by trying to do the right thing, such as, when we're in a relationship and I'll give you a great example, because nowadays everyone wants to self-love, but some people's definition of self-love is also about thinking about their needs first before their partner. And the harmful part of that is, if you're in a relationship and you're in a monogamous relationship, you have to think about the dynamic of a monogamous relationship. And always remember that when you're monogamous, self-love is about you are your own happiness. So you don't need to be fucking other people, because you also do still have a partner. you're in a monogamous relationship. So if your idea of self-love is having sex with other people, you don't love yourself fully, because number one, if you loved yourself fully, then you know that you are enough. And if you are sharing that enoughness with a partner, then you shouldn't be out here fucking other people. Because now you're literally showing yourself and lying to yourself about loving yourself, because you still feel like you need to act on lust, or you need to act on, the companionship of someone else sexually to fulfill you. And that's not self-love, because self-love is about, I love myself, I'm good, I'm content, I don't need, lust, I don't need money, or I don't need greed, like I am enough. That is the mentality also of self-love. So again, everyone's definition of self-love can also be harmful, and that was the perfect example for that. Now let's talk about sin. As I referenced earlier, the idea of fear and love, and how it can stop us from being free, and how it can stop us from being, completely in love with God, or completely in love with ourselves. Sin is a huge part of why people are unable to free themselves from their own mental binds, their own mental ideas of freedom. And unfortunately, the idea of sin is very misunderstood. Number one, there's a beautiful YouTube channel, that I love, and their name is called The Bible Project. One of the beautiful things that I love about The Bible Project is that they literally remove all of the mundane, or the modern take, or the ancient take, if you will, of the Bible, and they quite literally keep it spiritual, or they quite literally keep the Bible moral. And the beautiful thing about that is that because they keep it moral, they don't pin anything on race, color, sexual orientation, whether you're gay, whether you're an atheist, it doesn't matter. They do not pin it on a group of people. They quite literally translate the Bible on a global scale. So if you still feel like you have a hurt or a destroyed relationship with God because of the Bible, and you want some clarity on the Bible, what you can do is use that YouTube channel for some clarity. And so I digress. One of the things that I learned from the Bible Project is the definition of sin being transgression. And a lot of people have used the word for sin to mean so many things, but quite honestly, the word for sin, according to the Bible Project's translation, when they did their own research, they described sin to be the meaning of transgression, because that is what it meant back then from the original Bible's language, Aramaic and Hebrew. And there's also a lot of Greek translations that also were translated from the Bible. And so it always comes back to the word transgression. And the word sin quite literally means betrayal or transgression against God and against people. And if you go against people, then you're going against God. And if you go against God, then you're also going against people. And that's where the whole 10 Commandments come from. And those are the sins that we're actually supposed to stay away from. And so sin is quite literally harm to self, harm to God, or harm to people. And harm to people is also harm to God, just as harm to God is harm to people. And I know that sounds a bit confusing, but to make it more understandable for some of you, God is love, right? So if you go against love already, and you have the idea that God is love, but you don't give a fuck about God, or love in this case, then that means that you also don't give a fuck about people. And when we understand that we come from God, then we are also parts of God. So there is no such thing as God judges you. You know what I mean? We kind of create that. We created fear. We created, the idea of the devil. We created hell. And hell is a conscious state, which is something that I have mentioned in so many of my other lives. But sin is quite literally a betrayal against people. It is a transgression against someone else. Transgression, can be, and these are sins, quite literally, the real sins. Sins can be killing someone. Sins can be stealing from someone's home or stealing someone's property. Sins can be sleeping with someone's partner. Sins can also be what else? Hatred, greed, envying, using magic to destroy someone, using spiritual methods to destroy people, anything that is really like a trespass against someone. And that's why in the Our Father we say, forgive us as, what is it? Sorry, I have to say it all over. So, Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre, venga a nosotros tu reino, y haz tu voluntad en la tierra como tú lo haces en el cielo, nuestro pan de cada día, danos hoy. Perdona nuestras ofensas. Forgive our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That quite literally means, I'm sorry, I know I said that shit so fast, but I'm so used to praying but that trespassing is actually that sin against others. So when we pray the Our Father, we are quite literally telling God, forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And quite literally, that is like a karmic circle, and a lot of people don't realize that, but you're literally praying for yourself and for others when you say that. But you must quite literally forgive those who sin against you so that God can forgive you also. And the whole idea goes back to the ancient idea that we are all parts of God, therefore we are all connected. And if you sin against others, then you also sin against God. That's mainly why I had to force myself to also love even those that I used to profess that I hated. Or at least spiritually love them despite, because you got to also understand that spiritual bodies and physical bodies are not the same thing. But I'll get into that another time. So always forgive for self. Always forgive for your relationship between you, the world, and God. But you don't never have to have a relationship with other people. And that also goes into self-love. So I digress. Bringing it back, self-love, sin, and all of these things play a huge part in who Anaisa is in our lives, or who Anaisa Pia is in our lives. And who she is in our life is quite literally the energy or the vuelta or the aspect of free self, self-loving self. The aspect that my energy is not free for everyone, and if you want it, then I need an exchange, because that is also self-love. Meaning, if you take pleasure in helping other people and that is an exchange to you, that is totally honorable. If you take pleasure in helping other people, but your exchange is that you want money in return, that is totally honorable. If you, you like seeing other people happy, but your exchange in that is just their thank you, that is totally honorable. So everyone's definition of, self-love will always be different, as well as what makes us happy will always be different. And each and every one of those are totally honorable. But always, 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 it's always okay to want an exchange for the things that you do. If it makes you happy, to want a thank you or to want loyalty in return, even though that's really not, because you should never do something good expecting something back. But it is honorable to always want a thank you, or to do services in exchange for, food, or in exchange for money, or whatever it is. But always make it clear. You know what I mean? Never do something and then expect something in return. Always make it clear. I'm doing this because I want this. That's totally honorable. You know what I mean? Just like any brand business or something, they make things and they want something back, which is profit, or, recognition, or they want to thank you, whatever it is. So that is part of self-love, sin, and also relationships. So now let's get into the last part and the ending of this video of what I wanted to talk about. Your relationship with self and your relationships with exes, past lovers, and things like that. A lot of times we don't know how to let go of resentment, we don't know how to let go of anger, we don't know how to let go of trust issues, and we also do not know how to let go of memories. And I've noticed that psychologically we often tend to remember things by what was emotionally at their peak. So for example, we often tend to remember what scares us before we remember the conversations that we had a month ago. We often tend to remember, our worst, sexual experiences before we remember a promise that we made, to our parents or some shit like that. We often tend to remember what scares us, what made us happy, or what made us fall in love before we can remember or recall small things. And that is the huge part of psychology. But the reason why I bring this up is that oftentimes when we are in relationships that are toxic, we tend to carry that memory into every single relationship, whether it is a friendship, whether it is a marriage, whether it is a future relationship. We take those memories and we don't know how to let them go. And I struggled with that for a very long time. And I will start with this. It will take you having to extend yourself into either a new relationship or into either therapy, whether therapy is with self or therapy is with spirit. But in order for you to break that fear, you kind of have to dive into the ice again. And the reason for that is oftentimes you grow from uncomfortability, and if you try to remain in comfortability, you're never going to grow. And when it comes to relationship issues or trust issues, staying out of relationship or staying away from them essentially is good when it comes to healing and learning to let go. But essentially, it becomes an issue when you're literally avoiding relationships because of these fears. And it's okay to avoid those relationships, but you always must allow others to help you. Allow yourself to help yourself and allow others to help you too. Because not every person is out there to hurt you. And essentially, those bad memories, when you carry them onto other relationships, whether it's friendships, family members, or whatever the case may be, you will always project that, that fear onto them. And sometimes that fear can be, example, can I see your phone? Who's texting you? Or who is this individual? And I'm responding as someone that, would literally project past experiences into new relationships. And quite literally, this is what I would advise you. When it comes to delving into a new relationship, allow this individual to show you who they are rather than bringing on these thoughts of who they may be based on past experiences. And that's what I'm trying to get into. A lot of us are unable to let go of the past, and we tend to take the behavior patterns of other people and project them onto the other person or onto the next person. And then we begin to react to them and behave with them as we did in our past relationships, sometimes with extra frustration or extra stress and extra anger. And what you can actually be doing, especially if you're a spiritual person, is you can be projecting that anger so much onto them that they actually move away from you, and they may want to break up with you, they may start, not wanting to speak with you anymore, or they may become distant. And it is not witchcraft, it is not the evil eye in your relationship. Oftentimes the problem is you. And that is something that a lot of people don't tend to realize. But how you treat other people is oftentimes gonna determine how they will react to you, because every action has a consequence. Every word has a consequence. And sometimes you don't know if that individual has already been through that enough that they quite literally don't want to fuck with you anymore. And you can't sit there and say, oh my god, I don't have luck in love, or no one wants to love me, or I'm gonna die single, or I've been so single for so long because everyone is shit. When in reality, you never even gave that person a chance, and you have to consider that. When you don't allow that person to show you who they are, you can't literally say that love isn't for you, because sometimes you are the one that's burning the bridges. Whether it's by assumption or it's quite literally because you do not want to mess with this person anymore. There's so many communication failures or even projections of the past. And we always often tend to behave the way that we did or the way that we feel is best. And as humans, 3 big things about humans is we must eat, we must sleep, we must have sex or procreate, and we must survive. This aspect of survival is always applied in relationships, because when we feel like we're getting cheated on, or we feel like we're afraid of something, that survivability kicks in, and immediately you get defensive, you get hostile, you want to argue, you want to get the facts. And sometimes to you, the facts will only make you comfortable when it is the worst news possible. Because in people or with people that have always been felt like they were lied to or were lied to, because that's valid too, in relationships or with victims that have been lied to a lot, they sometimes do not want to hear the truth. Actually, what'll make them feel better is hearing a lie, or sometimes hearing the worst news. And that's sometimes what'll make people more comfortable. And what a lot of people don't know is that, say for example, I'm in a relationship right now and I just caught my partner texting his ex. Without asking questions, I immediately am thinking this person is still in love with that person. This person doesn't want to let them go. They want to be in a relationship with them. So immediately I begin to project all of these thoughts onto them, and I'm like, oh, so you want to fucking cheat on me? You want to be with this XY person? Immediately I had just forgotten about self-love. I also forgot about sin, fear, and love, which is what we just talked about in the beginning. And the first thing I get into is survival mode. And that survival mode is about preserving self. And as the human being, that is what you're doing in this relationship. First thing you're thinking is, I need to survive, I need to get away from this danger. Because in your mind, when you are hostile or when you are assuming or projecting or fighting, you are essentially showing signs of, I need to survive, I need to get out of this situation. So in me projecting all of these thoughts onto this person, they may have never had those thoughts, but over time, you're literally pushing them away. And you cannot be angry if, because of that pushing away, now they want to actually start thinking or considering being in love with their ex. Or perhaps they start thinking, well, maybe if I am texting my ex, maybe I am in love. And you're not realizing that sometimes your words, again, have consequences, and everyone's words strike or remain in the subconscious of other people. And a lot of people don't realize that. But a lot of psychology plays a role in how you treat yourself, how you love yourself, sin and you, and your relationship with self and with others. And that was just a short example. But all in all, the entire message of this whole live is truthfully, always practice self-love. And if you find yourself in a situation like the one I just described, remember that self-love is also ask questions and also be okay with the response. Because if you see something that contradicts that, self-love is also knowing, man, I don't need this relationship. And truthfully, if I'm getting played or I'm being lied to, I don't need to be hurt anymore. But I also don't need to argue about it. Like, fuck it, I'm just walking out. Because that is self-love. You do not have to anger yourself. You don't have to stress yourself out. If that person does not want to be loyal or committed to you, you don't even gotta fucking argue about it. Just walk out. Because that is self-love. Self-love is about, again, preserving mental health, preserving financial health, preserving emotional health, and preserving physical health. And that is also freedom. Knowing that you can walk out of anything that you put yourself into. And lastly, I want to close with the fact that I do not celebrate voluntary suffering. I don't celebrate voluntary sacrifice in the sense of, if you know that you're in a toxic relationship, oftentimes we find ourselves rewarding or even congratulating people that put up with abuse, people that put up with, bad behavior, or people that put up with, just abusive individuals. That idea of celebrating or congratulating that comes from a Judeo-Christian mentality of turn the other cheek, or, be passive, be, okay with suffering because Jesus died on the cross and, he took all our sufferings. I don't celebrate that because that to me is not self-love. That just isn't self-love at all to me. And self-love is so important, just for your own mental health, because you will literally die from a heart attack or stress or die like Jesus did. And quite literally every abuser is still living on. You know what I mean? So there is really, it's like, why do we celebrate that shit? No lie. Like, it's so wrong. Because the good people are suffering, the good people are dying, and we have all of these abusers still walking around. And it's like, bro, women don't deserve to suffer. Gay men don't deserve to suffer. Black people don't gotta fucking suffer. Like, you know what I mean? So it's necessary to always remember that, number one, I do not celebrate suffering, especially if it's voluntary. If it's voluntary, like, why? You know what I mean? And I understand that, and I'm not referring to the toxic relationships that you literally cannot, for physical reasons, leave a abusive relationship, like domestic violent relationships, because your life can actually be on the line. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the types of people that put up with domestic abuse knowing that they can get out, or people that put up with verbal abuse knowing that they can walk away, or people that put up with sexual abuse in the sense of, you're getting cheated on constantly and you remain. I don't feel sorry for people that choose to suffer in that way. Those are the types of people that I mean. Or you're at a job and you're constantly being harassed or threatened and you still choose to stay. I don't celebrate and I don't reward things like that, because I feel like, number one, loving myself and knowing myself, I'm fucking you up. If I gotta throw a hot ass pan of oil or fucking hit you with a bat over your fucking head because you have lost your fucking mind, that to me is self-love, because I gotta motherfucking preserve my mental health. And you got me fucked up if you think I'ma fucking stay there and get abused. So, I digress. But that's in closing. Love you all. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, freedom and self-love is all motherfucking 2020 and moving forward. And for those of you that are struggling with self-love, I hope that this video reminds you that self-love is a lifetime journey. It is about always thinking about how you can react. You may not be in charge of how people treat you, but you are in charge with how you respond to that treatment. That's self-love. Love you all. Luz y progreso.